Hello and welcome. Today I want to talk to you about the linking rings. The IBM names their chapter organizations the linking ring. They name their magazine the linking ring. The linking rings are a classic in magic. And when presented, many magicians say it's an ancient trick, and it's pretty old. I'm not sure that it's ancient, but it's pretty old. It's been around a long, long time, and a lot of magicians love to do it, and a lot of magicians hate to do it. I performed the effect, 15 years probably. I don't do it now because I'm doing primarily mentalism. But the first time I saw it, this gentleman here, Doug Henning. Doug Henning was the first magician I ever saw perform it. He did it on one of his television specials. I think it might have been the second. But I just, when I saw this, it blew me away. It was just one of those moments in magic when I was just totally in awe and wonder. And I remember asking my dad if he would pick me up a set at the magic. He worked downtown, and Yogi Magic Bart was down there, and I didn't want to wait till the weekend. So he agreed to do it. He picked me up a set, brought it home, and I looked at them, and I thought, Doug's got to be doing a different trick. And that's the way it is with manipulation. If you're doing the cups and balls, if you're doing even a chop cup routine or a billiard ball routine, thimbles, all of those types of things that involve routine manipulation, a skilled performer can make it look incredibly magical, and Doug Henning certainly did. So that began my journey to the rings. It was years later when I knew Denny Haney. And I had purchased the Symphony of the Rings. I'd found out that Doug was doing Vernon's routine. I purchased the Symphony of the Rings, and I studied it, and I learned it somewhat. But Denny Haney asked me to bring my rings down. He said he would go over it with me, so I brought them down. We spent almost a day, well, maybe not a full day, but a good part of a day going through the routine. And by the end of my time with Denny, I was taking notes. I always take notes. You know, I mean, you can tell me something, you can review it with me over and over. I'm going to take notes anyway. So I had my notepad with me. I still have those notes. I still have a notebook full of that stuff. So Denny spent pretty much the better part of a day with me going through the routine. He taught me things that, while they're referenced in the book, it's a little bit like the Crazy Man's Handcuffs. You know, it's referred to in the Tarbell series. You can see it there, but really it's Michael Amar's work that really puts it over the top. And the same with this. I mean, Vernon did the work. He put the routine down on paper. But it's a very hard thing to glean out of that book. And so it's helpful if you have someone who's doing it that can help you along. And source Denny Haney did that for me, and I will always be indebted to him for that. He also helped me with the billiard ball routine. He helped me develop a billiard ball routine as well. So when it comes to some of the more difficult sleights, you know, it helps to have a teacher as opposed to a book. I believe in books, I read books, but you know, some things are just better taught. So I did the routine for many, many years, to some success, to some not success. There were probably audiences that it plays for better. I was doing a show at Goucher, and I'm going to put the link below so you can take a look at that. We happened to record it, and we didn't record the gentleman's reaction. This gentleman that I got up out of the audience, and these were college kids. So I asked for a volunteer. This gentleman raised his hand. I brought him up. This very tall gentleman. Nice guy. Did the routine with him, handed him the rings. He was completely perplexed. He was an engineer, I believe. And he came up to me after the show and he told me that's impossible. And that's exactly what you want when you're doing a magic show. It completely boggled his mind the way Doug Henning did for me years and years ago. So that was an extremely satisfying performance situation. But what I'd like to do is give you some history, some sense of the rings. So 1764, Max Maven by the way, did the research on this, so I want to make sure I call him out and reference him. Max Maven suggested that it was a book written in 1764, a Japanese book by the name of Hokasen. That's Hokasen. It basically means street performing. A book called Hokasen, written in 1764 by Hirash Hose, refers to the iron rings, and Max Maven believes that is the earliest reference to the linking rings, 1764. Here is a photograph or a drawing of a French performer by the name of Philippe, and his real name was Jacques Andrew Noel Talon. He was one of the first recorded magicians to use the rings routinely in his show. During the second half of his show, he would dress in Oriental or Chinese robe and a conical hat. He took 8-inch solid metal rings, had the audience examine them, then he brought them back to the stage, and he performed. He linked them, he unlinked them, he did designs with them, as popular today as it was popular at one time. So he did an elaborate linking ring routine, and this was in the early 1800s. So we're in the 19th century, and this gentleman is doing it. Years later, Robert Houdin. Now this would be the mid-19th century, 1845-ish, mid-19th century. He was doing it in his show. All the things that he did, the blooming orange tree, the ethereal suspension, all the wonderful, the automata, all the wonderful things that he did, and he did do a linking ring routine in the mid-19th century. Now, it wasn't until this gentleman here, late 19th century, early 20th century, that the routine became what you would call popularized, and this is the gentleman who did it, Ching Ling Fu, as opposed to Ching Ling Su. Ching Ling Fu popularized the routine, did it routinely in his show. Again, late 19th century, early 20th century, so we're into the golden age at this point. I can't speak for Thurston, I can't speak for Houdini or Blackstone. I don't know that they did it or didn't do it. But I know that from the time of Ching Ling Fu, it became a very popular routine among magicians. And then you come to 1960, maybe before 1960. Vernon was performing really from the war era, World War II, all the way up, I guess, until the 70s maybe. He had a very long career. He published The Symphony of the Rings, I think it was around 1960. I have a copy of that. In fact, that is the copy I studied. I learned the ring routine from Vernon, and then Denny Haney polished it up for me and gave me some pointers and helped me get over the rough spots. But it was Vernon's routine that inspired so many, and generally speaking, people learn the Vernon routine. It's called The Symphony of the Rings. It's available from your local magic dealer. I would recommend that you pick it up if you're interested in performing this routine. Learn that first, and then maybe learn some of the other routines. 1960, Vernon. Now, you go to 1973, and you have this guy, Richard Ross, doing what would be considered a very elegant routine. His was put to music. It was almost a dance. Now, Denny told me, when he was teaching me the routine, he said, David, you want to have an audience member touch the rings, even if you're going to do a Richard Ross type of routine. And I was always in love with the artistic types of presentations. But Denny had a real sense for showmanship and for putting magic across. And so he is the one that told me you need to have people handle the rings, because then they're convinced of the solid nature of the rings. They know how heavy they are. And I think that is important. Now, there are very modern routines I'm going to talk about in a few minutes that don't do that and can't do that for a good reason. And they're extremely elegant, and I'm going to recommend those to you as well. But Richard Ross really took this in a different direction. Now, the thing about Richard Ross's routine, it is so good that I think it's the exception to the rule. I mean, I understand what Denny is saying, and I agree with it, and I did it for years. I mean, I always got a member up out of the audience. We did it together, and the rapport between myself and the audience member was always fantastic. It's one of those moments in the show where people are, if they don't like the trick, they're brought into it because of the audience participation. But Richard Ross did such an elegant routine. And it's so magical, the elements that he did. And by the way, Richard Ross published his routine, so I'm going to put a link to it below. You can take a look. A lot of these older routines, 1973, you don't have very good picture quality, and it's a shame because it's so beautiful. But I'm going to put the link below. Take a look. If you like the routine, then search out his book, because he gives you every detail. There's photographs, there's descriptions. I own the book as well. And I picked it up because there were certain techniques and moves that I really wanted to incorporate into the Vernon routine. So folks, you know, that's one of the ways you can be original with your routines. You learn a number of routines, you see where some of the strengths are, you combine routines, and you create something that's unique to your own performance. Now, 1976, that was the year I saw Doug Henning perform this routine on his national television show, The World of Magic 2. It was the second special, and I think Ricky Jay might have been on that special as well. But he gets this little girl up out of the audience, and they do this routine, and it changed my world. It really did. Doug Henning has contributed so much to the art of magic. Arguably, he is the father of the second golden age. Some people believe that we're in a golden age, that there's opportunity like there's never been for magicians. And most people point to this gentleman right here as being responsible for that. Doug Henning was from Canada, and originally he was doing magic like everybody else. He was wearing the tuxedo, and at some point, I think it was during college, a roommate of his challenged him to not compromise on his personality, to let his personality come across, hair and all. I mean, back in these days, you know, you had Channing Pollock, you had Richard Ross, you had a lot of very classical magicians, and so when Doug Henning started to perform in essentially hippie clothes and hippie hair and all that stuff, some magicians, of course, didn't like it, but he struck a real note with popular culture, and he ended up doing a theatrical presentation in Canada called Spellbound, and it just so happened that some Broadway producers were in the audience. They saw him performing Spellbound. They loved Doug Henning. They didn't like Spellbound. And they brought it to Broadway. They brought Doug Henning to Broadway. They called it The Magic Show. It opened on Broadway in the 70s, and Doug Henning was able to pick up really fantastic management, a personal manager, and the manager was able to work him into the television specials that really catapulted him to a household word. After the first special, Mobil Oil, by the way, sponsored it. And here he has Owen Magic doing most of the illusions for the first special, and then he has Johnny Gahn doing most of the illusions for the second, and thereafter. I think he might have done 8 specials total. But he brought magic into popular culture like nobody else. And I think it was his pioneering efforts that paved the way for David Copperfield, that paved the way for Chris Angel, that paved the way for many magicians that came after him. So Doug Henning's contribution to magic cannot be overstated. Let's put it that way. He just was magnificent, and his linking ring routine, as I said, it catapulted that routine in my mind to one of the greatest in magic, and I still feel that way. I may perform it again. I rehearse it. I have my rings right back here. Oh, by the way, let me show you this. This is my ring bag right here. I had this bag custom made by the same person that makes the bags that I carry my tarot cards in, and she also made my cups and balls bag as well. Same person. Her name, she goes by the name A Well-Appointed Witch, and you can find her on Etsy. So so take a look on Etsy. Look for A Well-Appointed Witch. She's made a lot of bags for me. I love the magical qualities of her work, and that's why I use them for my rings. I use them for my cups and balls. I use them for a lot of things. So I highly recommend her to you. But Doug Henning, wow. You know what? I'm going to put the link below. By the way, I did not find the link to just the linking ring routine. So I'm going to put the link to The World of Magic 2, 1976. And I'm going to give you the exact location of the routine in that video, so that if you want to just scroll on, you can watch that. But hey, watch the whole thing, because it's lovely. I still watch the Doug Henning specials. Thank God for YouTube and those that post them on YouTube, so that I can go back and view them. And they stand up. They really do. His magic was wonderful, and it is just as relevant today as it was in the 1970s and early 80s. So, this is Paul Daniels. And I don't think I've said enough about Paul Daniels. Let me just mention right now and go on record as saying, Paul Daniels, I love Doug Henning, I love David Copperfield, but if I could personally emulate anyone else's style, and by the way, that is totally inappropriate. I would not emulate anyone else's style, but I love Paul Daniels. I love to watch it. He could do anything. I mean, literally anything. And it would be entertaining because of his warm personality and the way it comes across the lights, and he just embraces these audience and brings them in, and he's a warm, personable, wonderful entertainer, and I watch Paul Daniels constantly to try to understand his style and what made him so popular. He was certainly the most popular magician in Britain and possibly the world. But this is 1998. I'm going to put a link to it below. FISM, Denny Haney, and his assistant Min, and this is Min, were at FISM that year, and Paul gets Min up to help him with the linking ring routine. It is hysterical. Now Min knows how the routine's done. She's a magician, right? But this is hysterical, and Paul was just brilliant. So if you want to see how entertaining the linking rings can be, watch this video. Paul Daniels does a wonderful job. Now this right here is a gentleman by the name of Masahiro Yanagita, and he performed a miniature version of the linking rings known as the Ninja Rings, and he used, I think he used 4 rings that were more or less 4.5 inches in diameter, and I think he popularized this routine in 1988. So what he basically did was he opened up the ring routine to close-up performers. And by the way, I have done the linking rings, I mean the full-scale linking rings, in a close-up environment. The linking rings is an extremely diverse, versatile trick. You can do it on the street. I've seen street performers do it. It's a great effect. I was doing, I used to do hospitality suites. In a hospitality suite, you have the advantage of having a table in literally a suite, and people mull in and mull out, and it's a very close-up environment because they're standing around your table and you're doing tricks for them, and the crowd is kind of circulating. But I did the ring routine in those environments. Now I've done table hopping. I've not done the rings table. I have done the cups and balls table hopping. I've not done the rings that way. You could potentially do it with smaller rings, but I mean, you can use full-size rings. It doesn't matter. The issue is carrying them. That's all. So this is Mike Caveney. I probably haven't talked enough about Mike Caveney in my presentations here. Mike Caveney did an entire book line. He's a publisher, and just to show you, here's a book that he wrote by the name of Carter the Great, and let me just flip through this a little bit to give you an idea The photographs magnificent. What he does generally is he'll give you the life history of a great performer, and certainly Carter the Great was wonderful. He'll give you the life history of a performer, and then he will get into some of his techniques and methods in the back part of the book. And so Mike has published tons and tons and tons of these things. I mean, most of this shelf right here is Mike Caveney. I have another full shelf over here of Mike Caveney's work and his publications. Now these things are numbered. Let me grab another one here. Here is Survey Leroy. Okay, so as I open this up, and maybe Survey Leroy isn't. Oh, here it is. This is number 239 of 1,000 copies. So books like this are extremely limited in their print run. This is 1,000 copies. That's it. I have book number 259. Denny used to get these for me, but you can get them straight from Mike Caveney. He still has a number of them, even though they're limited in print run, and they're wonderful. They're wonderful. I actually saw Mike come and speak at Denny's years and years ago, and he's a wonderful lecturer. Highly recommend him. As a performer, he likes to perform with common everyday objects. He does a cup and ball routine, I think, with plungers. Very funny. And he does his linking ring routine with coat hangers. So where I'm going with this is, as over time people have evolved different routines, doing basically linking ring routines with other objects. Mike Caveney uses coat hangers. I've seen it done with barbed wire. I saw a guy do that at Denny's with barbed wire. I can't remember his name. I looked for it for this presentation. Didn't find it. Didn't really like the routine because the rings, the illusion of the rings require a certain, well, let's put it this way. I just didn't think the barbed wire worked. But, you know, it's all about presentation. Dick Zimmerman did the linking rings with hula hoops. And E.J. Moore invented a version with ropes, so he invented the linking rope routine. But this is Mike Caveney here. Now, one last thing, folks. The New Flying Rings by Viktor. Last name is Voitko. When I saw this, I thought, wow, the rings are. Look at that. I'll just hold still for a second. One of these rings is floating. So again, my description is not going to do it justice. You're going to have to take a look at the routine. Nice big rings, and the rings float into each other and apart. Oh, just wonderful. This gentleman, Viktor, I believe he won FISM with this routine, maybe. I'm not sure, so correct me if I'm wrong. But he has published the routine, and it's called The New Flying Rings. I believe it's available through Stephen's Magic Emporium. It's not inexpensive, but it is just gorgeous. It is. You know, I love the rings, and I love seeing ring routines, but this one, wow! I mean, this guy takes, I think, in the spirit of Richard Ross. In the tradition of Richard Ross, it's a very elegant routine. It's set to music. It's poetic, but it is so magical because in addition to the solid through solid, you get the added element of levitation, which is just wonderful. So, folks, that's my my little 2 cents worth on the linking rings. Thank you so much for joining me. By the way. If you enjoy what you see, please subscribe. I appreciate those of you who have subscribed. My subscription numbers have come up dramatically, and I appreciate that. And I also appreciate when you comment. It gives me the opportunity to interact with you, and I enjoy that. So subscribe, comment. Thank you so much for joining me. I will be with you soon. Have a good day. God bless.